please subscribe to help you and your motorcycle perform better.
My name is Dave Moss. For over 20 years now, I've been helping riders maximize the performance and life of the tires on their motorcycles. This is Contact Patch.
Here's a preview. Our thanks to Pacific Track Time. Come ride with us and bring it. And Cali Photography. One of the best tools to rider development is trackside photography. Take advantage of it.
Testing at Buttonwillow Raceway with Michelin's brand new Power Cut 2. That tire is a race DOT. And where does that fit in the category of tires? Well, you've got your Hypersport tire, then you've got race DOTs, and then you have full slicks. The purpose of the test is to figure out what we need to do with geometry for the motorcycle, suspension settings, and then pressures. Interestingly enough, when we look at the tire and the structure of the tire, the front and the carcass of the front is far more resilient, way more resilient in fact, and the rear carcass just depresses really easily to give you way more grip. So the front will take a lot more duress under braking. The rear, from pushing on the tire, shows that when you get on the throttle, that contact patch is going to expand to give you more drive grip. All right, so we have the tire that's coming off, which is a Dunlop 180/60, and we're putting on the new Michelin, and this is a 190/55. So the first thing to look at is the height difference. So right now we can see there's quite a difference. So the Dunlop is taller, but that's a 180/60. Even though this is supposedly a 190/55, which we all would make the assumption of that it is a bigger tire, in height it is not. So the next thing to look at is the profile. The 180/60 is way sharper on the sides than it is on the top. So as you get over, you're going to get a lot more drive grip on the side of the tire here. A lot more in terms of lean angle. So we're getting off the top pretty quickly, right about there, into the profile of the tire. So from 11 to 1, it's pretty flat. But when you go from 1 to 3, it drops right off extremely quickly. When we move to the Michelin, even though obviously side to side is different, the profile is only flat at the top right about there. So 1130 to 1230 maybe is flatter, but as soon as you get outside of that, it starts to drop off. But notice that the drop off here is very almost flat visually. It doesn't drop down. You can see there's some curvature to it, but it's not a huge drop off. So in the design of the tire, when you're on the throttle from there to there, this portion is not a huge difference when you're leaned over, so you're going to get more grip. So the part there is, this tire is going to turn faster than the 180 is. So on the rear, the roll profile is quicker on the Michelin because the center of the tire, the flatter area, is much smaller than it is on the 180/60. There is a huge difference in the front, especially from 2 o'clock out, well 1:30 out. There's a huge drop off here on the Dunlop. The Michelin is much smoother in its drop, and that would match the rear roll profile. So as far as rolling the bike, it's going to be slower turning in the front because it's much more even in the profile than the front is. Now let's take a look at height. So there's the bubble smack in the middle, and you can see the gap on the front. A little more right there. And then Mr. Williams found a very nifty tool. We have a profile generator.
It was too small to do with the rear tire. I got to get the bigger one for the rear tire.
So there's our profile, roughly, for our Michelin. And gently put that down. You can see it's a huge difference in profile. Granted, this one's used, versus a brand new one. But again, that gives us something to manage our expectations when we go on the track about how the bike's going to turn, rather than fly into it blind wondering what on earth's going to happen. So generally, with the Michelins, it should be slower turning. We've got a lot of geometry work to do in the front so it doesn't turn too fast because the front's so much smaller. But nice little find on the tool to help you with profile generation. The first thing we've got to do is check what we're taking off and what we put on for circumference. To do that, we don't have a piece of string, so we'll do it the easy way. That we're taking from the middle of the tire to the rear fender or rear mudguard is 35 millimeters. Then when we put the next tire on, we've got to measure the same distance to see where it is. Is it more or less? So now with that flat, just like the rear, it is exactly 20 millimeter gap for the front tire, smack in the middle of the tire. On the Dunlop, the front was 20, right smack in the middle with the silver part flat. So our gap now is 24 millimeters. This tire is significantly smaller, which means we have a 4 millimeter bias forward. The rear was 35 and it is 40. Let's do that again and check. Yeah, it's 40. So quite a shift down on the bike, and it's an even shift, roughly in measurement. It's very close. Each one is significantly smaller. Now, because overall the geometry is almost even in the drop, so the engine is actually lower off the ground than it was with the Dunlops, I'm going to be a little bit liberal with the correction in the front end here, because the track we're going to test at has a lot of high-speed braking and very intense braking. So I want to give myself some insurance so that as the speed picks up and we really start asking questions of the front tire, I know I am going to have braking stability and I'm not going to have to manage the brakes. If I find that the 3 millimeter change was too much once I get up to pace, then obviously there's nothing stopping me changing that to 2 millimeters or 1 millimeter. But I have to guarantee myself braking stability to give the tires a fair test. So I'm going to be very conservative with this geometry change.
So basically typical pressures on our newest tire, Michelin Power Cup 2, which is a race DOT. Cold tire pressures, you would be looking at 22 rear, 32 front. You are running to our general warmers. On a hot day, generally 140 degrees would be perfectly fine. On a cool day like this, you want to keep them at 180 degrees. So this tire is a dual compound where basically you do have a hard center. Not that that matters much out here, but you're going to have basically a soft shoulder. Basically, the part that matters where you have your edge grip and you have your drive grip is essentially a slick. Basically only making the groove cut out in the center, which 8% of it is cut out, which makes it a DOT approved tire.
All right, the warmers have been on for 30 minutes on high, so we're going to check what our hot pressure is right now. So we're at 36 even. So that went up 4, which you'd expect from the warmers getting to 180. So that's a good sign. Let's check the rear. And the rear is at 27 exactly, so the rear went up 5. Okay, so that would suggest the rear warmer is more effective than the front because it's getting the tire to a higher temperature when it's hot. So it might be time for me to check the front warmer using the core temp to be able to assess the next time out if my front tire is truly getting hot compared to the rear. So as we're coming in towards Phil Hill, one of the things to realize with a new tire is the roll profile. See how slow the bike moves across? As we flick the other way, it's taking forever to come around. So I know the roll profile of the bike is slow. I also know and feel the front end's high. So going into AFM sweeper, I got to steer it in and lock it on the radius. Stay where I am with the RPMs if at all possible to keep momentum. Then once I get to the end, now we're in the technical stuff. So now I have to work a hell of a lot harder to swing the bike around to get it through and out, heading down for the last turn for sunset. Now I've got to brake and set up. So trail braking with a slow roll profile, I can trail for longer, and off we go on the front straight for another lap.
Once you get them up to temperature, you want to check hot pressures directly off the track. We generally like to see between 24 and 26 in the rear, depending on the track, and in the front you want to look between 34 and as much as 38 in the front.
All right, so first session's done. No weight on the front of the bike with the geometry change I gave it. Came in hot off the track at 35. The nipples are still on the front of the tire, even though I was braking really hard, mostly trail braking. So that says there's no weight on the front end at all, so we have to do an urgent geometry change before the next session. So that's the bad part, and it was a real fight to get out there. And you can see how it's ridged where I'm starting to brake here. It's actually wobbling, not from tire pressure, but from geometry. So the usual band of tear we get is up here, and it's a thin band showing the forks are too high. Even though we did the mathematics here and set it to what we thought would be good, in reality, in the real world out there, it's not. There's nowhere near enough weight on the front. So we've got to do at least a 3.5 mil geometry change before I go out. Rear scrubbed in perfectly. Lots and lots of dreadlocks and mouse poo. So the rear came in at 28. So I set it back down to 24.5 hot, ready for the next session. So I think we'll be good on the rear pressure for the morning. While the track heats up, we'll see what we have to do for the afternoon. Again, being careful on scrubbing, not knowing the profile of the tires, the shiny area is quite big, right? Until I get to learn this tire and its grip level at full lean. So at that point, we're good as far as that goes. So plenty of weight, plenty of grip, just too much pressure. No changes on damping yet for the rear, but the front we got a lot of work to do. So in between the session now, we need to do that geometry change right out of the gate. Because we put these tires on, the engine was closer to the ground. I made the geometry change in the front for safety. Last thing you want to do is go out and tuck the front because it turns for you. We can't afford to do that at all. In that case, starting with the front end just a little bit high gives you excellent braking stability, but it makes you work really hard in the first session to get the bike to even initiate, let alone transition. So now we're going to creep up on where it belongs over the course of 2 sessions and geometry changes per, so that I can figure out what I need. So first is I'm going to drop the front. We raised it 3, so I'm going to put it back where it was. I'm going to drop it 3, and we'll start there. Now we've lowered the front end, that's going to put more weight on the front. I'm already very, very close to bottom just from that scrubbing session, which is very typical of Button Willow. So I need to add more preload, and I need to add more compression. And test that for the afternoon. The other part is on that front tire, what I've got to judge is grip under acceleration and braking. So as you come into 3 and you come into here bus stop, you've got to know what that front tire is doing and where you're at as you leave the technical section of the track. With the lower pressure on the front, we're starting to get much more even wear on the tire. Trail braking, I can do what I want with the front tire. It just bites and grips and asks it will deliver. Where I'm picking up the throttle before and had to wait and then get on it again, that's gone. That band's disappeared. So the lower tire pressure definitely worked without losing braking stability. So coming in here, your trail braking skills are critical, and the trust in the front tire has to be 100% absolute. So pressure and temperature with pace is now coming together beautifully. Last piece of the puzzle now is getting clear track, and now I want to really start hammering on the brakes. Trail brake again into 1. Now slightly off camber, we got that great feel on the front tire, accelerating even on the edge of the tire to then go ahead and set up for turn 2. A little bit sketchy in a couple of places, but overall way better session. Braking lines are in full. So up here to there, they're digging in here where I initially apply, and they're bleeding away here. And the front tire pressure is absolutely on the money, because grip, you just couldn't fault it. Now having a bit of faith in the tire, you can see where I'm trying to get on the gas now. That's how quickly I feel much more confident. And the throttle application band has come way down now that we got free rein and good traffic. So a lot to look forward to tomorrow with different pressures and different experiments with rebound setting in particular. But by far the best session of the day, especially with clean track. That was a lot of fun. Great tires, tons of grip, especially that front. It's phenomenal. So very well done, Michelin, or Michelin. I'm not sure if that's quite right, but we'll be told.
Catch the full video at DaveMossTuning.com. Dave Moss can tune your suspension no matter where you are on the planet via his remote tuning service. Contact Dave on Facebook or by email, dave@DaveMossTuning.com.